I'm Chronix from the most extreme wrestling, and this is your John Morrison weekly update. Let me ask you something. Do you remember this classic footage?
What's Johnny Nitro doing out here? This isn't his match.
He's watching his buddy's back, Cole, just like he said he would.
My God, the speed of Chris Benoit.
There it is, Cole. Benoit's got a crossface locked in. He's tapping.
Benoit's not letting up, and Johnny Nitro can't get in the ring to stop it.
Hey, come on now. Cut Nitro some slack, Cole. He just tried to help his buddy, and it backfired in a big way.
Don't remember that footage? I can't expect you to. That is what has become known as the Chris Benoit effect. After Chris Benoit killed his wife, killed his child, and then killed himself, WWE kind of got a negative light shined on them. They quit referencing Chris Benoit. They quit showing pictures of him, videos of him, matches of him, and even completely distanced themselves from even acknowledging the fact that he ever wrestled for them. And that is what the Chris Benoit treatment is. Completely not showing anything or mentioning it. Was WWE doing a little similar thing to John Morrison on Raw? We had the Slammy Awards, and you had such great Slammy Awards as the A-lister of the year that was won by, oh boy, by Snooki. But we all remember Snooki, right? She came in to wrestle at WrestleMania. Yeah. John Morrison was also in that match with Trish Stratus. And this was a match that actually went on after Triple H and The Undertaker on a match higher than that. But anyways, they're showing Snooki in her pre-recorded interview, and they start showing clips of her in the match, and then they show John Morrison and Trish Stratus also celebrating the victory with her. Now, they were cutting out John Morrison. It looked like they was going out of their way to cut him out of the footage, but I can kind of understand where they were coming from, because it wasn't about him, and it wasn't about Trish. At this particular moment, they're trying to get over Snooki, so show Snooki, right? Makes sense. So, I guess they weren't trying to snub him like they did some other people, like Edge. Okay, go on to the next thing. On WWE Magazine, they have an article, and it is the 25 greatest rivalries of all time. Not of recent time, not of this year, but of all time. And you believe this? John Morrison and The Miz are on this list. I can't even believe it myself. I had to go look for myself and see it firsthand. And yes, it is absolutely true. John Morrison and The Miz are right there. 25 greatest rivalries of all time. Well, they really are giving star treatment for a guy who's completely distanced from WWE, aren't they? Just saying. Anyways, remember the first TLC promo? The very, very first one before David Otunga was oiling himself with a white background and talking about ladders and whatnot. I don't know what was up with that second promo, but the first promo had John Morrison flying around doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's another thing. The Slammy Awards had like the holy moment or whatever, and you're telling me that John Morrison couldn't find his spot even on that list, but he gets on the 25 greatest rivalries of all time? And this is just holy moves of the year. Well, I guess he couldn't have been on the list because then people would have thought, well, if he wins, he's going to have to come out. Well, I guess that makes sense. Now, we move on. JR posted another blog that has some stuff about Morrison, and I will nicely read it to you off of this screen. JR says on his blog, I am not bothered by John Morrison leaving WWE and choosing to step away from the day-to-day rigors of the business to allow his body to heal and recharge his creative batteries. No one can predict when Morrison will return to the ring, but I suspect several months. I think stepping away from the weekly travel and demanding business that has no off-season is a wise thing to do if someone has the ability to do, especially if someone has injury issues. John is still a young guy, and I will not be surprised if he doesn't return to WWE. Wait, he says, I will be surprised if he doesn't return to WWE. Let me make that clear. So yes, he expects him to be back. Better than ever, and in a much better position. And boy, we can only hope. Now, like I said, that makes it even more clear to me that it's a storyline. Now, it could not be a storyline. Someone mentioned to me, you know, Chronics, that Jeff Hardy had similar treatment. They talked about him, they talked him up when he's off of TV, but then he ended up going right to TNA. I think that's a little bit different, because John Morrison does not have drug issues, and at the time, Jeff Hardy had some drug issues. Now, he came back to WWE clean, and then he ended up not being so clean, had some issues, and he was gone. So I find this to be a completely different thing. John Morrison's is more of an injury issue than anything. Now, you can speculate and say, well, he's made some people mad and this and that, but it was WWE that signed John Morrison to a contract extension. Just saying. Now, it is official that John Morrison is looking for bookings in autograph signings. I'm sure that he's probably not going to take any matches because he's in his recovery stage. Of course, if we start seeing John Morrison wrestle every single weekend in indie shows, it's pretty obvious that he's probably not that injured, especially since, I'm not trying to knock indie scene or anything, but if you go to the indie scene, you can only expect the guys can't work as well because they're not in WWE or TNA, or Ring of Honor for that matter. And a lot of these guys are still in, more of a training phase, and they are especially not going to be used to wrestling somebody with the athletic prowess of John Morrison. Just saying. So we see on Twitter that Melina, Chris Masters, and John Morrison are hanging out having what a lot of other post-WWE career guys do, have a, thank God I'm not traveling every single day working for WWE party. So that was cool. Chris Masters currently is not working for TNA. I think he's going to do a project for TNA, but he's not going to be like on Impact or anything like that, like directly, on TNA television. I don't expect him to go with them, but it is interesting because Chris Masters is a free agent. Melina and John Morrison are also free agents, and them all together, well, they could pose a threat wherever they would go, and if they went together. Now, that is 100% speculation. I have no verified news on that, and that is not even a rumor. But they were all seen in a picture. I'm surprised a rumor hasn't been started already that they're going to form some sort of faction. So, on Zack Ryder's episode 44 of Z True All Island Story, tongue twister for me for some reason, we see Zack's dad officially get rid of the John Morrison t-shirt and glasses. Sad, sad day. But it is interesting that they even showed it, since he's not working for WWE. Well, I guess you gotta write him off somehow. You gotta write him off on the episode by blowing him up, and you gotta write off Zack's dad wearing the John Morrison shirt. I mean, that's all he ever did, pretty much, so I guess you gotta move on. Now he's donning the Zack Ryder gear supporting his son. And John Morrison gets 2 mentions on this episode. So, an incredible amount of news coming out this week for the John Morrison Weekly Update. I was actually surprised at the amount of news coming out, especially after he's been out of the company for, 2 weeks? So this has been your John Morrison Weekly Update. I'll be back next week, and check out all the news you need at john-hennigan.net.
The Inca people are sick with malaria.